Well, good Sunday morning. Well, due dates are closer than they appear. And in school, due dates are not suggestions, they're deadlines. And for one school district, decision day is just around the corner. So what's the plan? Well, this past Wednesday, United ISD held a workshop to discuss which cost-saving measures are being considered, including the possible consolidation of some elementary schools. For months, the school district has weighed various options to address a multi-million-dollar budget deficit. But as Wednesday's meeting, one by one, multiple parents took to the podium to urge the board that any decision, no matter how difficult, must be made with the right goals in mind.
If you don't do enough or nothing at all, the consequences all through the district there will be consequences all through the district, the city of Laredo, and Webb County. I will leave you with one little saying to consider. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
But the reality is that this is a difficult decision because it's very emotional. And a lot of the arguments that were being made by a couple of the folks that were there at the committee meeting were very emotional.
Well, that's where we begin this morning's discussion. Joining us today are United ISD Superintendent Dr. Gerardo Cruz and Board President Javier Montemayor. They're joined by KGNS General Manager Luis Villarreal, who also took part in that focus group that took place last Wednesday. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for making time to be with us this morning. You know, we want to talk a bit about that focus group. Luis, you were on that focus group as well. And then tell us what the reaction was after this past board meeting and some of what you heard there. Let's talk a little bit about why that focus group was put together.
That focus group was to garner input from the community. We had different stakeholders. We had professionals there, we had business leaders, we had campus administrators there, we had teachers and parents, and we also had representation from our school district trustees. They were provided the opportunity to put 2 representatives.
How many were in that focus group?
For that meeting, there were 22 individuals. We had a total of 28 individuals who were invited, and 22 ended up showing up. Good conversations, courageous dialogue happened. We were able to present our cost-saving measures and our conciliation plans and the reasons for that. We reviewed our current state of enrollment. We discussed how state revenue is provided to our school districts and where we are in terms of our deficit and what we can do to reduce that deficit to ensure the great programs continue at United ISD. So great dialogue occurred. Our commitment, first and foremost, will always be protecting instruction, making sure the services that United ISD still will be provided. So discussions regarding that, discussions regarding our transportation, how will these impacted students be transported? We did tell them that, busing will continue, so there's no need for worries for that. However, there is a worry that, we do have to do things to make sure that we ensure that we have all the great services that are happening. And one of them is, of course, payroll costs. We also reviewed many of our cost-saving measures, which is a complete package. It's not only the consolidation of schools, but what we're going to be doing as a school district to ensure that we are better stewards of our finances and being transparent in terms of our plans to ensure the future of United ISD.
Javi, there were no board members at this focus group, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that was on purpose.
Yes, we didn't want any of the committee to be influenced or swayed one way or another by any board members or politicizing the committee. So board members were given the opportunity to name representatives. I named 2, and several of the other board members named other representatives as well. And they were to participate and just listen and give suggestions and look at what we're facing and what we're seeing. And if they have different ideas, if they have different resolutions, then we can always entertain those.
It is very hard for people, Mindy, to understand. I guess from my perspective, it was eye-opening to see the difficulty in navigating through the whole process because, as I think somebody in the Sunbelt just said, there's a lot of emotion around this. But at the end of the day, it's a mathematical problem that needs to be solved, right? And sometimes we need to step back and say, okay, what do we need to do?
Mm-hmm. You were invited to be on the focus group. So you went in there, your kids out of UISD, they've gone and graduated already. So your stake in that is obviously
Well, I'm a taxpayer, and
right?
my wife is a teacher,
Right.
and and obviously this is a situation that affects the entire community,
Yeah.
not just the people or the kids that are working there. Obviously, when it touches you, it gets a reaction more than anything. But yes, that was my reason for being there.
So let's talk a little bit more about the focus group. So Dr. Cruz, 22 people in there, you started from scratch, told everybody what the problem was and which are the sheets that we have here, what the school district is doing already to try to make up the deficit. First of all, how much is this deficit?
Right now, we're about a $44 million deficit, and all of that is attributed to many factors. First
I was going to ask,
yeah.
how are you in the whole $44 million?
First and foremost, I think it began during pandemic with 2019, the pandemic in 2020, going into 2020. We saw a surge of operational costs and mitigation costs and, dealing within the pandemic. There's a such thing called ESSER funds, which were federal dollars, to support instruction and to support mitigation factors of the COVID-19 virus. Well, in doing so, revenues weren't that great, so many school districts across the state utilized this federal funding to provide raises, one-time bonuses, hiring additional staff. So, that money was great for a few years, but in 2024, that money is no longer there.
Disappeared.
So what happened now is all the investment that took place with these federal dollars now has to be incurred with the general fund, state funding. So that's how this deficit, began. So in doing so, we now have a payroll issue. Many years ago, United ISD had close to 44,000 students, and we're still operating as such. And we did this analysis with, the school consolidations, and we have a lot of empty seats out there. The school district right now is investing in empty seats, but we should, do our best to ensure that we're doing proper staffing, which we are doing now. All our principals know, and we've done an analysis, based on your current enrollment, you're going to be losing so many staff members, so begin to prepare for that. We're also looking at other measures in terms of how we are doing our payroll costs, transportation costs, being more efficient, which all is part of our cost-saving measures. However, at the same time, this decrease in enrollment, we're also losing state funding. On average, public school students will receive $6,000. Okay, so we're receiving $6,000 per student, but yet we're still operating as if we still have 44,000 students. You do the quick math, and we don't have enough.
Let me jump in, Dr. Cruz, because I think in the private sector and in the world that we operate in, I would not have a job tomorrow if I all of a sudden told my people, hey, I just realized we're going to be $44 million in the hole. It isn't part of the job as administration to be looking forward and not continue to spend as if we were enrollment of 44. I mean, this enrollment did not disappear from one year to the other. Or did it? I mean,
It was a steady decline since
true.
COVID, right?
Steady
well, there was an increase after COVID for about a year, if I remember correctly, and then it dipped again. But what I'm saying is, and this is one of those things that touches people because they throw words out like management, mismanagement, and things like that, and those words have the appearance of negligence or people doing things for their own benefit, nefariously, or whatever you want to call it. And that's not what I'm implying. What I'm implying is, at some point, somebody should have been saying, "Hey guys, this is coming," and not saying that any of this would be different, but perhaps these cost-saving measures would have been better implemented if they had started sooner. And so, again, and I don't want to go down the hole of we could have done this, we could have done that. All I'm saying is, at some point, there's got to be some accountability for somebody who did not see this coming, or who did not, whether it was the board, whether it was administration. Shouldn't there be some accountability and some skin in the game, or maybe a head to roll or two that said, hey, this is what happened? Is that not fair to ask?
Yeah, those are fair questions to ask. But since COVID, we've lost over 3,000 students, which equates to close to $30 million less in state funding. You know, I think it's a combination of things. I think if you look at what's going on in Austin and what they're doing to public education, is certainly something that, you know, needs more attention to. You know, we're competing now with charter schools, private schools, and vouchers. And the unfairness, at least it is, when it comes to funding public education, you know, on average is about $6,000 for any student.
Yeah, we pay
in an
$10,000
ISD.
in a voucher
And a
to
voucher
one
is
lead, right?
$10,000.
10,000 to a
So,
voucher.
you know, it's a combination of things that have transpired. And, you know, back when Esther was around, you know, hey, it was money and free-flowing, so to speak, where we could hire staff and we can give one-time bonuses and we could rely that on raises. But when it comes to a raise, every year it's perpetual. You owe it every year, over year. And if the state isn't providing those funds,
Right.
you have to dig into your piggy bank, which is our fund balance.
Yeah.
At some point, you know, we hired employees, you know, during the COVID years for, you know, through the ESSER funds, mental health professionals, other areas that needed assistance, and then we incorporated them into our staff after those funds had been gone, and so that added to our costs.
But that, again,
yeah,
looking
but
back,
looking
that
back,
that wasn't necessarily a wise choice.
probably not, and I think that's something a discussion that we had at that time when we were preparing the budget back then. You know, I had warned, hey, you know, let's be careful with these individuals because they're going to increase our costs. And so what you see now is increased costs tremendously, like your household and mine. You know, your insurance goes up, your gas prices go up, your cost of living goes up, and so we're having to fund that, and we still have the same student allotment that we had back since 2017. We had hope the last several years that the state was going to increase that allotment, but it didn't happen. We're looking at $6,000 to $6,500 per student. When you look at vouchers, what the governor, when he implemented this voucher system, he gave $10,000 per student. When you look at the charter schools, their recapture is about $12,500 per student. And so, and we're still at the same amount, bringing in the same amount of dollars. We continue to have our homestead exemptions for United ISD residents. We are strapped on how we can raise taxes now. You know, we're losing enrollment. And so these are all the things that we saw last year when we started preparing. We had administrators in charge before Dr. Cruz came in. But when Dr. Cruz came in, you know, it became more of a realistic discussion. And looking at what I've read across, you know, on different sites, you've got over 60% of state school districts that are all dealing with similar issues: lower enrollment, budget deficits, and they're closing schools, they're laying off individuals, and that is something that this board is very cognizant of. When we look at the numbers, we look at between 400 to 500 individuals, employees, that if we had to reduce in force, that's the number that we're looking at. And when you talk about reducing staff, 400 people, laying them off, you're talking about a serious effect on our community. Not only their household, a lot of these people have loans, they have investments in our community, they have children in college, and that effect, it's a ripple effect across our community. So we're trying to do everything before we get to that, and make sure that we have done everything here, including consolidation with schools, including all the other cost-saving measures that we have.
I think this is a great place to take a pause, because when we come back, we do want to look at these cost-saving measures that you all have already started implementing. So stick around. We're not going anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for sticking around. We're joined today on this Beyond the Headlines episode by UISD Superintendent Dr. Gerardo Cruz. We also have the UISD Board President, Javier Montemayor. We're talking about what is happening right now with United ISD, with their deficit and proposals on how to save money and meet and balance out their budget. So before we get started with the cost-saving measures, you had a question.
I wanted to ask Javier, the homestead exemption, what number does that amount to for the district? What is the money that the district is leaving on the table?
I venture to say, just on informal discussions about that, it's probably anywhere between, $2.5 to $3.5 million, more or less.
Okay. And that is not something that the district has the authority to remove without state approval, or what would be the mechanism to do it?
The board could pass a resolution to remove it, just like we passed a resolution to keep
implement it, right?
To implement it, but it's every 2 years. So
Okay.
it would have to go through some steps. We'd have to have a public hearing, and raise our hands to approve that. But it probably wouldn't happen until sometime in the future.
Gotcha. And then the other question is, I was told during one of the discussions that a RIF, or a reduction in force, is difficult to execute at a district level for some legal issues?
Well, these are contract employees.
Yes.
And
Isn't there a right to work state?
Well, public education has a different function. The education code protects employees, and so it protects our teachers, it protects our staff, and so they have due process rights. They can object to being terminated or not having their contract renewed, and we'd have to have hearings, and we'd have to present all our information to TEA and the state education director. So it has to go through a process.
All right. Yeah, probably another whole show about that we can do, but.
Well, let's talk a little bit about cost-saving measures because, we tune in to all of the board meetings. You've had many board meetings talking about this issue. We've never seemed to have gotten as far along in the presentations to hear what you've done, yet when folks go to the podium, they always have been saying, what else have you been doing? What are the other options? We want you to look at everything else before you close the schools. Come to find out, through the focus group, that there are 20, if I'm not mistaken, things that you've done or are in the process of doing or considering doing to save some money. Can we talk about these?
Yes, these measures have been discussed at our board workshops. As a matter of fact, we have a dedicated website, United for the Future. So anyone out there who wants to see all of our presentations, how we've been communicating.
Take a little
our plans.
time and go there and look.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion to anybody watching.
What's the website address for
United
that?
for the Future. Go to United ISD, and you're going to see a banner. It's going to say United for the Future. You click on that. All our presentations, our board presentations are there, both in English and Spanish. Well, some of our cost-saving measures, certainly understand, consolidating the school is emotional, and certainly, what else could we do? So we did go back to the table, and we have reviewed several places where we can start our reduction. We are looking at contracted days for a certain amount of
What does
employees.
that mean for those of us that don't know what a contracted day is?
Well, if you look at our pay structures, certain employees, like if you're a teacher, you're contracted for 187 days. If you are a district employee, you're contracted at 226 days. Of course, then you get paid on those days. So proposal was to reduce days for certain employees, and right now we're looking at employees who are at 226, which are pretty much our district supervisors, district administration.
Not necessarily teachers.
No, no teachers at this time. So we did some math. If we do at least 3 days, we're close to about $887,000.
It's a daily rate.
A daily rate.
It's a
Got
daily
it.
rate.
So you reduce their contract by 3 days. They don't get paid for those 3 days. Okay.
They don't get paid, and they get an extra 3 days off,
Okay.
which they can use at their discretion.
Okay.
Other things we're looking at are stipends.
Time out. But this is what happens. We start asking questions about, we let the man finish. Let us get through the list.
Okay.
So we're looking at the amount of stipends that we've been giving out district-wide, and if we do a 50% reduction, and when it comes to stipends, this is where we are hitting, some of our teachers who garner some stipends.
And coaches.
And coaches, yes.
Okay. These are the ones that teach and do a sport
coach,
afterwards.
yes.
Fine arts,
Fine arts.
band directors.
Okay. So you're thinking about reducing them by half.
By half, in which calculations about close to $3 million. Right now, we are at our hiring freeze. Only vacancies or only positions that have direct services to students are being filled. So if it's a teacher or a teacher aide, if it's going to be a security guard, if it's going to be a police, we're going to hire those, and we have. All of those other positions have been frozen. So we do have an estimated cost of another $3 million. Modification of our transportation routes. We had several buses that were going after hours. helping students, get back home after athletic events, after extracurriculars. So we did not take those routes away. We just modified them. We just reduced them. So, for example, if Alexander High School, if you had 5 buses that were running after school, taking kids back home, instead of 5 buses, now it's going to be 2. We did an analysis, we did a ridership analysis, and we said, well, instead of 5, we have enough riders to fill 2 buses. So we did a cost-saving measure, and that's an estimated cost of about $820,000 now. Other things that we're looking at is, third-party vendors, looking at our contracts.
Yep.
There was a lot of discussions regarding our digital platforms. And going back to ESSER came in, it was not only, accelerating instruction, but mitigation. But they were pushing, the virtual environment, and every school district
Had to implement
ISD,
it,
had to implement, get these digital platforms. But ESSER right now, so how are we going to pay for them now? That's when, the general fund came in. So another, measure where the district had to incur funds or incur costs that were once supported by ESSER. Also looking at travel, we put a freeze on travel. All of those have to go through my office or my management team. The only travel that is being approved right now, if any person who needs to go for a compliance issue, if it's grant related, or if it's a certification issue, those travels are going to be allowed. Student travel will still happen. We want to ensure that we continue that as well.
They'll still go to compete,
still
go
sports, fine
compete.
arts, things like
And
that.
that still gets expensive because if you look at our employees in the transportation field, we don't have enough, we have a lot of vacancies there. And so we still have to use charter buses sometimes to
Because of the bus drivers.
Quickly, yeah.
Yes, because of the bus drivers. So
Okay. This one's been talked a lot about, the consolidate underutilized programs, $2 million. What are underutilized programs?
Some of those are our digital platforms. We're looking at our usage reports. Our teachers utilizing these resources, our students utilizing these resources, and actually at our last board workshop, we had our curriculum instruction department present this information, and we are making some cuts to that. Last year, we started our cutting down on some of our digital platforms because there tend to be some redundancy. I went back and asked, okay, we have 5 reading programs. Which
Is
one
this like
is
iMath
better?
and things, iExcel?
iReady.
Okay.
iReady.
iReady.
there are some of those, Mindy, where after COVID, the state was pretty much making it almost mandatory that we purchase these programs to address some of the learning loss. And so we had to basically go through the state, to purchase some of these software.
Okay.
And they may not be utilized as much now, but again,
They need to be available.
they need to be available. Exactly.
But you've been looking at them, and you
Yes.
might just let some of the ones go
Yeah.
that they're not being used.
Yeah, there might be some duplication.
Yeah, or the duplication of services.
duplication.
Okay, sounds good. Energy consumption, utility costs. Now, is
Utility
that,
costs.
everybody turn off your lights as you walk
Turn off
out of the
your lights,
classroom?
and maybe perhaps raise the air conditioner 1 degree.
Yeah, yeah.
And see
Push
how
it up
that
to
goes.
78.
That's ongoing now. I've had teachers and employees call me, sir, it's hot here at Alexander or at United, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And because it's on a timer now.
Yeah.
So
I do have a quick question. We only have a few seconds left, but then we're going to come back and continue talking about this. Number 10 was concerning a little to some folks. Summer school program. Does that mean no summer school anymore?
No, we still are operating summer school.
Okay.
But there'll be more of a virtual environment for our secondary students.
Okay.
And we're actually starting summer school earlier rather than waiting in June. We're going to grab these students while they're in class and get them in the month of May.
Okay.
So we are going to see a reduction. We are still going to have, what is required when it comes to our extended year program for our special education students. And comes to our emergent bilingual students, those programs will still happen. Our summer feeding program, is still going to occur. That will still happen at our different sites across the school district. So we're just, trying to make it more efficient and making sure at the same time prioritizing instruction for our students who need it.
Okay, perfect. I know we've got a few more to get to, and then we're going to talk about the proposal that was mentioned at the board workshop. But we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We've got lots more to talk about. Thank you so much for tuning into our second half hour of this episode of Beyond the Headlines. For the very first time, we are moving into another 30 minutes of a very important conversation, talking to the UISD superintendent, talking about the consolidation of schools and their budget deficit. We also have the UISD board president with us. So Javi Montemayor has joined us together with Dr. Cruz. In our first 30 minutes, we did talk about cost-saving measures. We've got more that we want to discuss, and then we're also going to talk about some proposals and then what's going to happen for the big final vote next week. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about these next 10 items that you all are either in the process or have already implemented or will be implementing. Starting with number one, Javier, I think this one's for you, discretionary funds.
Hey, those are discretionary funds that that throughout the budget process, the board would get assigned a certain amount. This 350,000 was 50,000 per board member. There's 7 of us, and so those monies were used for the benefit of the children and the schools, things that weren't necessarily in the budget. For example, I've used my discretionary funds to support athletics. I've used some of my discretionary funds to support the fine arts, the band programs, dance teams, things that weren't necessarily included in their original budget, software programs, teacher incentives, tutorial programs, things that the schools, needed a little bit more help with.
I think when I served on the United Middle School PTC, I think we went to you for your discretionary funds because we wanted an awning or something over the bus where the kids have to wait for the buses.
Correct. Yes, I
So it
remember
was just kind of things like that that obviously aren't budgeted by the entire school.
And so that's what they were used for. And this is actually 50,000. We've gone as high as 60,000 per board member. And they're voted on by the board. They're presented. They're listed in the websites as to what is being spent. And so, yeah, we're doing away with that as well.
Okay. TRS surcharge, Dr. Cruz, for lots of retirees out there on TRS right now. What is that, a surcharge?
Well, the TRS surcharge, that is for retirees who come back and want to be part of United ISD or want to take on an employment position with us.
After they're retired.
After they're retired. So in years past, or actually it changed during this last legislative session where that surcharge, which the school district was paying to hire that individual, now the employee who comes in, who is a retiree and wants to be hired, the surcharge will be passed on to the employee. So we're going to be starting that in August.
Okay. Taken out of their paycheck.
Taken out of their paycheck.
Okay.
So estimated cost of $506. However, we are going to prioritize that because right now there is a need for bus drivers who are certified with CDL, and we do have a few bus drivers out there who retired and hey, I want to come back, be a bus driver again, and those we're allowing. So it's going to be tiered. It's going to be based on priority.
Okay, and that's a $500,000 savings
$500,000.
when you do that. Okay, what discontinued new wellness days were those? Additional
an
sick
additional?
days,
Those
or-
were additional wellness days. Every employee received 2 wellness days, and then last year another 2 were granted for a total of 4. But what we were finding is if you were a substitute teacher, we obviously have to pay that substitute cost. Yeah. So let's just say if you took those 4 days and we're paying a teacher, let's just say an average cost of $110 for a substitute, that's costing us $440. You multiply that by the number of teachers that we have, and it was in the millions of dollars. So we ran a calculation, did an analysis, and the board, went back, proposed a resolution that says we will keep the current wellness days. However, no new wellness days will be approved.
It was a way to help the employees when we couldn't perhaps give them a raise or a bonus. The wellness days were welcomed at that time.
Okay. Substitute pay. We were just talking about substitute pay. So it's going to be reduced.
We're going to be reducing it about $4. There are different tiers of substitute pay. We're still going to be competitive with the other neighboring school district, so that's a proposal on the table, and that will probably bring us close to about $300,000.
That's a cost that went up last year. We gave a raise to the substitute pay. We increased it, and we found that we were budgeting roughly about $4 million, and it jumped to about $8 million.
Wow.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah.
Just about. This is a big one, health insurance, and that's a conversation that the city also just recently had at their budget workshop on the high cost of health insurance. Are you guys seeing the same thing?
Yes, we are. I do have to say, for the record that, United ISD has great health insurance, and we're perhaps one of the lowest in terms of employee premium. But right now, we are on the cusp where the district can no longer afford that. So we are going to be having those discussions, probably as early as next month, where that cost will now be, incurred at the employee level. And that was something that was put in place prior to me. That was, the vision of the board back then, say perhaps in lieu of a raise, we're going to help you with, your insurance premiums.
For years, Mindy, the district has been basically consuming the increase in costs to the employees. We wouldn't pass it on to the employees. We'd absorb it. And it's gone up incrementally over the years. But that's just something that we can't afford to do now, given the way our state finances are looking. So, but it's been going on for years. We've always wanted to take care of the employees, and that was an additional way, other than the mental health days and the raises and bonuses and retention pay. That was another way that we'd help our employees by just continuing to absorb their increase in costs. And this all comes from an employee benefits committee that sits. It's a variety of employees from transportation, teachers, administrators, and they meet, and they're the ones who basically recommend to the board and the district, this is what we'd like to see. And so they're the ones who have a lot of input on this.
Right. And that's still you're still looking for a request for proposal, so you don't know if it's going to be the same insurance company.
Correct.
Okay. Right-sizing through staffing guidelines. Is that what we talked about just a little bit ago, where you're just going to look once again at...
a reduction through attrition. If you don't have the students coming in, we're going to follow the ratio. Instead of one school, instead of getting your 15 teachers that you're going to get, now you're only going to get 12. So now you're going to be losing 3. So we're making sure that we have good ratios in place.
Yeah, 22-to-1 at the elementary level up through about 5th grade.
Yes.
It's a 22-to-1 ratio, and so we're trying to make sure that we get that 22-to-1 per teacher. In other areas, in other under-enrolled schools that we have now, there's been some commentary that some classes have 14, some classes have 16, and so we're trying to right-size that now.
Okay. There's a big one, number 10, $2 million by reducing department and campus budgets by 10%. Yeah.
So 10% across the board. I think we can get close to $2 million.
What touches that line?
It would be supplies and materials, professional services, miscellaneous operating costs. Certainly not going to touch, payroll. We are going to, make sure that whoever is on board and, is part of our system, will get paid. But I think we can do be more efficient in terms of how we are spending our money, becoming more efficient.
So as a lifelong spouse of a teacher, supplies. I mean,
Copies. Yes.
but that's stuff that teachers have been paying for a long time.
And
And so,
I've heard
are we cutting them, or in other words? And I guess that has no bearing here. But I just wanted to see what those $2 million touch, because it's teachers from tissues, from copies, from. It's like, why do you have to pay for that?
Paper. Yeah, I've heard that for over 15 and a half years now. And I heard it last year during our budget process. We're talking about it now. The charge of the board has always been, as long as the campuses have everything that they need to be successful. And that includes supplies. And there are some board members who are very, very outspoken about this particular topic. And so, I'm sure we're going to be having that discussion.
Yeah. So all of these items, gentlemen, still not enough, obviously, to get us out of the hole. So at that point is when you started looking at closing elementary schools or consolidating elementary schools. Let's talk a little bit about that. We started off at 5, went down to 2. Where are you all now with that? What's your thought? And then I do want to talk about the other proposal that Michelle and yourself talked about. I don't know which one you want to start with first, the
Well, right now-
elementaries or the proposal?
Right now, we're at two proposals to consolidate two schools, which are Amparo Gutierrez and the Llano Elementary. Those are the two schools that have been identified. The Llano Elementary, is right in the middle. They have about four surrounding elementary schools, which can occur. One thing that we did also look at is our utilization. How many full classrooms do we have and how many empty classrooms do we have? And so that's the reason why that particular school was identified, also for their enrollment. We did a demographer report, and there's no
Did age
growth.
of the campus come to play in
Yeah,
this?
the age.
Because, these two are probably the two oldest schools remaining on the district, right?
They're
Or-
close, they're
close.
up there, they're up in age, they're up in age.
I want to interrupt you, Dr. Cruz, and I apologize. Luis, let's talk a little bit about back to the focus group that you sat on, you were a part of. You took their presentation, and at the end of the day, you said, no, not 2-5. What was y'all's reasoning behind that?
So I think out of the 22 or 23 people that were there was a moment in that discussion where I think we all feel that this is not enough and that things are not going to get better magically. The state is not going to reverse course on what they're doing. And so the feeling amongst some of the, I was going to say the majority of the members there was, why are we going to tiptoe around these things and let's just go full in? And our recommendation was, let's put the 5 campus closures back on the table. That's what we felt was needed. Does it hurt more? Yeah, absolutely hurts more. But we honestly don't think that, I think we're going to be here. Some of us may not be here next year, and having these conversations again, you're going to be dealing with another emotional set of families and kids that are going to be affected. And so we wanted to rip the Band-Aid and say, let's just do it. That was the intent.
So 2 elementary schools is just not enough. I mean, if you close down the 2 elementary schools this time around, are we going to be in this situation again? It's just to pacify right now, but then we're going to have to go back and do
right
3
now,
more?
if we do all these cost-saving measures and we add it all together, 13.5 million, we do the consolidation of schools, that'll get us close to almost breaking even. The amount of, I guess, we were going into the fund balance will be quite less significant going into this school year. But it is a long-range plan, and next year, perhaps we will be having this discussion again, because we are expecting a loss of additional 900 students.
Yep.
And the demographer indicates by the year 2035, we're going to be a school district of about 34,000 students.
We joke around here a lot. Our workforce here is relatively young. Well, young from my standards, I guess. I don't know, but they're not having children. And
Fur babies. I think
there's no babies.
Yeah.
Only fur babies. Yeah.
Fur
That's
babies.
right.
So there's a lot of fur
Those
babies. So
little
maybe we should
four-legged ones.
add some other classes that deal with fur. Maybe we should start charging for dogs. Things.
Dog care.
Dog care, yeah.
This, in my opinion, and this is only me, I think this is about a 3-year process. The adjustments, I think UISD is going to have to go small, in so to speak. This is an excellent opportunity for the district to, reorganize, restructure, start utilizing the schools at their capacity. And so, closing these two or consolidating these 2 campuses, and if we're true to these cost-saving measures, it's about survival. It'll help us survive. But you're right. There has to be additional measures in the future to address bringing down that deficit that we're currently in. And like I said, it's about a 3-year process. There were originally five campuses that were identified with lower enrollments. Mind you, none of them are for low performing campuses. They're all performing really well. There was just the enrollment was just not there. But at this point, that's what staff is recommending, these 2 campuses. And the committee saw what we've seen as board members. Mind you, we've been having these meetings, not only public workshops, but every single board member has been involved in strategic meetings monthly, I want to say since late October, early November, looking at the numbers, looking at where we're going to be, not only this coming year, the 26-27 year, but 27-28. Demographers have come back and given us numbers. We're looking at all different cost-cutting measures, and those are cost-cutting measures, which is different than addressing the low enrollment, the capacity at the schools. And so that's where the other ideas from the other board members comes in, and Ms. Molina and I have had those conversations.
So we want to talk about that. So at the budget workshop, there was pretty late in the budget workshop, there was an interesting proposal that was brought up. Michelle Molina talked about it. Yes. She said this was part of a committee. Come to find out when we asked her more about that committee, the superintendent, it's a committee, it's an advisory committee that you put together some time ago. I'm not too sure who this committee was, but I want to go ahead and let our viewers hear what Michelle Molina had to say about that, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
We've got campuses that are luxuries. What does that mean? Luxuries. 9th grade campuses and 6th grade campuses. Our neighboring district does not have that, and other school districts throughout Texas do not have that.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about what these luxury campuses are. We hadn't heard that expression before.
That was mine.
So luxury campuses, she's referring to 9th grade campuses and 6th grade campuses.
Well, okay, so that was a conversation that Michelle Molina and I had when we were talking about alternatives to the current list of closures and consolidations. So just to add context to it, the freshman campuses were brought in under our bond and our bond program. Every single high school has a freshman campuses. And that was, the architect of that was our former superintendent, Roberto Santos. It took a long time for the public to accept the freshman campuses because the argument was, well, you're going to disenfranchise the students from the main high school. But the purpose was to provide those 8th graders going into the high school some level of maturity, some adjustment, get them assimilated into the high school life. Today, I called it luxury because no other district in the state, from what I can tell, has freshman campuses. The neighboring district does not have that. Michelle Molina and I had extensive discussions about that.
El Paso ISD does.
Does? Okay, well, I stand corrected. So this is something that is, maybe it's something that we don't necessarily need to be operating with, looking at the current times. You're talking about anywhere between 800 to 900 kids. We'd have to move them into the main campus. And then perhaps now we open up those freshman campuses and we can move our middle school students into new and improved, more modern freshman campuses. For example, United Middle School, which is the original, that is the oldest campus, by the way. The original high school, moving them.
With the bomb shelter and everything.
Yes, moving them into the freshman campus, perhaps moving Elias Herrera into United freshman campus, better security. All these campuses have the necessities, the amenities, the cafetoriums, the libraries, the gyms, the practice facilities, parking, security. They're good campuses. The issue became an issue of capacity. Dr. Cruz and I spoke about this. I talked about it with different management people. The issue becomes, can we do it today? It's an issue of capacity. A lot of our new campuses, LBJ, United High School, are newly built campuses from our bond project. Those are not ready to accept an additional 1,000 students. Alexander and United South may be able to accept them, but we're going to have to bring in portables. And so this is not something we can do between now and August. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some upgrades. It's going to take some modifications. And that is something that we are currently working on. We only have one 6th grade campus. That is the United Middle campus. Moving them into the current 7th and 8th grade campus at United Middle School.
As it was.
As it was before. It's possible. But being the oldest campus in the district, we've had some severe plumbing issues there. And so we've had to spend, last year we spent about $1 million. I'm being told that this year we're looking at $1.5 million in upgrades to our plumbing. And if we can get that situated, then we could be ready to bring in those children there. And it would be another cost-cutting measure.
Right. And then you could bring in, I think it was mentioned, bring in the STEP Academy that's out in
Yes.
Rio Bravo over to that sixth grade
Correct.
campus, and that would save a lot of
Transportation
gas
costs,
money,
yes,
taking the
correct.
STEP Academy kids all the way to Rio Bravo.
Yeah, so
a
this
little
is-
domino effect there.
Exactly. So this is a two-year, 3-year, plan. It would certainly, again, it would help us go small. It'll help us right size. And, I may have some Alexander, administrators upset with me, but I'd certainly think that, United Middle School students and parents would like a more modern building. And so I think that those are possibilities that we're looking at. Bringing in all these different changes. I did speak to Mr. Santos about that since he was the architect. I said, sir, I think this is a possibility. He said, well, the issue that you have right now is not at the middle school or the high school. The issue, according to our demographer, is at the elementary. We're losing students at the elementary level. So we're trying to address that.
That's going to eventually move.
Eventually, correct. And so as we move through the process, we're going to start making those adjustments for the middle and the high school level, because it is going to
Right.
it is going to flow domino effect, as you said, into the middle and high schools.
So doing this with any kind of shuffling with the ninth grade campuses and repurposing ninth grade campuses is not going to happen in the summertime. So it's not going to, in essence, stop from needing to close down the elementary schools.
I think all this, Mindy, again, this is just me, all this has to be done
You have
as
to
a
look
whole.
at it holistically. Yes, I mean,
It's a whole.
Yeah.
It's just not one thing is going to solve the problem. Or shutting down the sixth grade and moving step over here is going to solve the problem. I think everything put together with these cost-cutting measures, not just now, but next year and the following year, and from here on out, is going to have to be worked as a whole.
If you look at people's reactions, if everybody is being, I'm going to use this term probably not appropriately, but if everybody's being hurt by this, then you might be doing something right.
Yeah.
But everybody needs to feel it somewhere. It's
course.
going to affect students, it's going to affect staff, it's going to affect teachers, it's going to affect taxpayers, it's going to affect everybody. But unless we are all willing to put into it, it's a problem.
This has been really difficult. We've dealt with boundary changes over the years. Students have moved. When we built San Isidro, we built Roberto J. Santos, we built other campuses across the district with our bond projects. Students were moved all the time. That was not necessarily such a big issue, but consolidating a campus seems to be a little more.
It's very emotional.
It's an emotional issue.
Yeah.
But the way I see it is that all these options, all our cost-cutting measures, all our consolidations, the plans that we have for tomorrow, all those they're going to be tough and they're going to hurt. Which is the one that hurts the least for now? And I think the plan that we have now is something solid. I think it helps us, live to fight another day. And and so people say, well, the message I get across the district from a lot of employees, a lot of administrators is, Javier, as long as we don't lose our jobs, as long as we don't lay off people, that would be drastic and that would be severe. If TEA were to show up, I suspect, and I've seen it, they bring in a board of managers and they bring a conservator to come in, and there will be no public comments.
Back in the 90s, when I worked for UISD, we had that. We had the master. We had
Yes.
Jimmy Vasquez.
Yes.
And he came in and he took over the school district, and it was his job to get everything back on track. So it's not like it hasn't been done before, and they're serious when they do that.
They are.
Yeah.
And basically the board does not have any decision-making authority, and we have to basically sit back and just watch and accept.
Yeah.
And that's not where we are. United ISD has a lot of history, has a lot of tradition. We have a lot of successful people coming out of United. And so we're going to do everything we can to fight and continue to graduate our kids and continue to provide the quality education. When they say mismanagement, it makes me kind of hesitate a bit, because if you look at the success of our kids and you look at what they've gone on to accomplish, our graduation rates in the high 90s yearly, you can't say mismanagement when you have those statistics, when you have that success. You can't say there's mismanagement here. I'd venture to say that if we had mismanagement, you'd have a slew of low-performing campuses. Yeah. But United is one of those districts that other districts across the state turn and look to as to what are we doing given our economically disadvantaged, our bilingual challenges, just the challenges in our culture here, and you have other districts who don't have those and don't perform as well. I just can't accept mismanagement.
Yeah. So. We've got just a few minutes left, gentlemen, and I just want to talk real briefly about next week. What's going to happen next week? Is there going to be a recommendation that's going to be made by administration, Dr. Cruz, going to the board, and that's it? You got to vote because time's up. You need to present a plan to TEA by the last day of April. Am I correct? And then at that point, you've got a couple of years to put that plan into motion before they come down and threaten to take over. Is that did I get that right?
Yes. Well, for everybody's sanity, I think we need to make a decision. I think the community...
We need to move on and start doing the things that we need to be doing.
The community needs one. Our teachers and staff need one. Just United needs one, because, like you said, we need to move on. We need to make the changes that we need to make. And
get back to the business of teaching.
And get back to the business of educating our kids. Yes, sir.
Agreed.
Is there any more public comment next week?
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. I anticipate we'll have some more, and that's okay. If people have the right to say what they feel and disagree, I don't have any problem with that. And the board as well. If you don't agree with the plan and the proposal, then vote against it. You got to vote your conscience, but we need to have a vote. Yeah. Up or down? Let's go.
Okay. And this meeting is taking place when and where?
Wednesday at 6 p.m. at the SAC.
And we'll be at the SAC.
So the recommendation is for those two schools, Gutierrez Elementary and the Llano Elementary, followed by a discussion in terms of what we're going to be doing now, what we're going to do in the future. In regards to this plan, like Mr. Montemayor says, this is just not a one-shot deal. It's going to take us many years to right-size our school district. This is a decision I don't take lightly. It weighs on me. It weighs on my leadership team. Certainly never did I think at any point in my career I would be faced with this decision of consolidating schools, and certainly understand the challenge. But I want to ensure the public, the same services are going to be provided. United ISD is a beacon to many school districts. I mean, we're leading Region 1. And just recently, I was asked, to present our plan in terms of how we're dealing with enrollment and our declining, and at the same time ensuring instruction. So that's a good bragging rights where other school districts are looking at us as a leader in this. But we're going to continue the great things that have been happening, the great services, and continue to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our students, and at the same time ensuring that all of our employees have a job. That there's been some rumors out there that we're going to be laying off with these consolidations. That's not true, and we're going to do our very best to get through this. And this is just the beginning. So yes, we are going to be having these difficult discussions, but hopefully it will become a lot easier. In terms of where we are, we need to, get a good balance of where we are going into August. Mm-hmm. If in fact are we going to be losing those 900 students, and how it's going to impact,
see what it looks like.
We're going to continue to adjust.
Yeah. This is a case of first impression, mind you, for everybody. Yeah. For administration, for the board, even previous boards and previous administrations. This is a matter of first impression. So everybody's, kind of trying to figure this out.
We get it. Well, we want to wish you luck this
you.
coming week. We know that that you'll make the best decision. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for sticking around with us for our first ever digital rollover Beyond the Headlines. But make sure to tune in next Sunday for another episode of Beyond the Headlines.